Natalie was 19, drunk and deliriously happy that night. She was going to marry Nick, the love of her life, the very next day. Her head was buzzing from the drinks, but she remembered stumbling her way down the dimly lit corridor to her room. She was out as soon as she hit the bed. When she woke up in the morning, she couldn't help but smile. Even though she had a splitting headache, she felt deliciously sore and alive. She heard Nick taking a shower in the bathroom and had half a mind to join him when she heard a knock on the door. Who she saw on the door left her gasping for air.
Nick?
Natalie was dumbfounded. If Nick was here, who was in the shower? Who was the man she had mistaken for Nick last night? The mess in the room was evidence of what had happened there. Natalie didn't know how to explain and barely got a grip on her thoughts. How could she have lost her virginity under such strange circumstances? What should she do? She couldn't bear to stay in this room even a second longer. She hurriedly picked up her clothes from the floor and rushed home. But bigger surprises awaited her.
How? How could you do that?
Natalie's father, Tom, was furious. She knew she wasn't going to get any support from her family either. Her stepmother never liked her. She was truly enjoying Natalie's ruin. And her stepsister Cheryl, they were never really close. Nick was the only one who could have understood her. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. Natalie tried to explain, but even she couldn't understand how she could have mistaken the stranger for Nick. Or was she missing a crucial clue? She had rushed out of the hotel in panic without even checking who the man was. And now she had no way to prove herself innocent.
Nick, I need you.
No, you don't. There will be no wedding.
Natalie couldn't believe her ears and were about to get married. With a look of pure disdain, he turned around and strode off down the corridor. Natalie started panicking as tears rolled down her cheeks. It was so painful that she could no longer breathe.
Cheryl, it's not my fault. Believe me, please.
I believe you, honey.
For a second, Cheryl gave her hope before she brought out her wretched phone, and Natalie started to get her answers. She was set up. Her life was ruined by her own sister. Meanwhile, in his office at the Claire Group, Bryce was looking at his assistant with a malicious expression. He had just received proof that last night he was set up, probably by his business rivals. He was drugged and sent to a different room than the one he had booked for himself. The girl had been brought in the same room earlier that night, and she too seemed drugged.
So, what do you do now?
Cheryl, I don't understand.
Natalie was getting one shock after another. How did Cheryl get this video? Why was she doing this to her?
How did you?
At the party last night, Cheryl had secretly spiked Natalie's drink. When the drugs kicked in, she pretended to help Natalie to her room, but actually took her to someone else's room, telling her that Nick was waiting for her with a surprise. So later, under the influence, Natalie didn't suspect a thing.
But why?
Because I want to marry Nick.
Natalie's world had fallen apart. Her stepsister was in love with her fiancé, and she was ready to go to any lengths to have him. Natalie was so angry that she couldn't utter a single word. Her whole body was trembling with fury. She rushed forward hysterically and wrapped her hands around Cheryl's neck. Hearing the commotion, her father rushed out angrily.
It was her! She set me up! How dare ye accuse my daughter of anything? You're just as wild as your mother was.
Unable to bear the pain any longer, she was on the verge of tears.
From now on, she's no longer my daughter.
What? Dad, what?
Natalie's father was easily influenced by her stepmother, He was an egoistic man, and he was deeply embarrassed when Nick canceled the wedding. He told Natalie to pick up her stuff and leave the country immediately. Natalie thought of her mother and her childhood, but no matter how hard she wished, she could never return to that time. Cheryl continued to pretend that she was innocent and gloated as she watched Natalie get kicked out of her house in a sorry state. Bryce told his assistant to go and check the identity of the woman who was in the room, but the assistant couldn't find her because at the same time, Natalie was being sent away. Natalie didn't even stay a night before she was packed off and sent out of the country. She had been exiled without knowing when she could return. She had lost everything in one night. From now on, she was on her own and alone in this world. 9 years had passed since she had been exiled, and in all that time, she hadn't made even one phone call to her family. All her feelings had been erased on the day she was thrown out. Her father treated her like she was dead and as if he couldn't care less about it. But last night, she had received a call from him asking her to come back. He didn't give any reason. He just said it was urgent now. She was on her way home, but this time she wasn't alone. Lost in her thoughts, she suddenly heard a lovely, gentle voice beside her.
Mom, hurry up!
It was Liam, her son, her most precious treasure. Only after she left the country did Natalie realize that she was pregnant. Although she was all alone, Natalie decided to raise him on her own. Liam had never known who his father was. Now that Natalie was going back, she had decided to find that man after all.
Here you go. You'll be flying to first class.
Come on, I'm sorry. Are you serious? Is this an airplane or kindergarten?
I'm sorry, what?
I don't buy expensive tickets to listen to children screaming. Mike, take the tickets away from her, please.
What?
Natalie couldn't believe the audacity of this man, and they got into an argument. At that moment, neither Bryce nor Natalie recognized each other. They didn't realize that while the two of them were arguing, Liam was looking at the man intently, and he noticed something. He stood quiet for 2 seconds before hurling himself at Bryce and then shouted, "Daddy!" Natalie and Bryce were completely taken aback.
Liam, what are you doing? It's not funny, making jokes about this.
Natalie was angry and confused at the same time. Why did Liam call the man Daddy? And then Liam told her about their identical scars. Natalie was shocked. Bryce's expression instantly turned ugly. Liam had always been sensible and listened to Natalie, but today she didn't know what was going on. No matter how much she tried to persuade him, Liam continued to question Bryce for abandoning his mom. Bryce had known many women who had claimed to be pregnant with his child, but this was the first time he had ever seen such a clever and affectionate son. He was sure she was after his money. Natalie was fuming as Bryce kept throwing such vile accusations at her. And then he said something that triggered her.
Hey, why don't you give him a proper family?
Whoa.
Don't you dare tell me and my son how to live our lives. Liam, come on.
Natalie ignored the fuming man and went on her way. No woman had ever put Bryce in his place before. They were all infatuated with his strength and authority. But for the first time, he had met his match, and he was amused by her. Natalie didn't understand why Liam had called him Dad. It was their first meeting after that night, but they had no idea that their fates were already intertwined.